G'day, hey gang, Steve from I'm Enough Coaching, wanting to jump on and share with you the principles behind mind management. Now, mind management is how we can start to work through stubborn problems. So do you know those problems, the problems that kind of just keep coming back and maybe will play on your mind, they'll keep you awake at night, they'll help you to worry and bring in a little bit of anxiety. These are the sort of things that I describe as stubborn problems. And what I want to do is share a process, a simple 5-step process that we can use to be able to manage our mind, to be able to work our way through these stubborn problems. Now, the 5 principles are, first of all, number 1, collect. Number 2, reflect. Number 3, we want to brain dump. Number 4, we want to review. Then number 5, we want to action and implement. Now, I'm going to break these down in this Facebook Live, so this might go on for a little while. So if you're interested in how you can manage to work your way through some stubborn problems and you're interested in mind management, and this can be used in so many different aspects of our lives, then please stick on and stay with this Facebook Live. So let's have a look. And if you are on, just pop in a comment and say hello. Let me know that you're there. So let's look at step 1, collect. When we talk about collection, what we're talking about is we're gathering our thoughts. We're collecting all of the evidence, all of the emotional awareness around the problem. We start to have a look at it and we start to think about it. We start to explore where that thinking has come from. What's creating this problem? Why is it so stubborn that it won't go away? We start to have a look at the cost that it may be having on us, the impact that it's having with us. We might want to start to think about how it's impacting not only ourselves, but other people. I know in certain circumstances, when I've got something going on in my mind, I can become a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess intolerant is probably the best way. I become a little bit intolerant, a little bit tetchy, a little bit direct, and a little bit rude. So this is one of the reasons how I find these problems, because I notice my behavior and I notice the reaction in other people. So I try to get and gather as much relevant information as possible. And what I'm doing in this process here, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat, is I'm drawing the information from my subconscious and bringing it into my conscious mind, which enables me to be able then to bring focus to it and to be able to start to bring curiosity to it. I'm also interested in gathering up the emotions, thinking about the emotions that I'm feeling. Being able to understand emotions is an extremely critical part of this. Excuse me. Hay fever. So if we can start to understand emotions, we can start to recognize them, then we can start to see the impact that they're having on us, be able to label them, to give them a name, and then to be able to process it using the 4-step strategy of name it, own it, feel it, let it be. Hey, Bev. Thanks very much for joining me. I know you're out on the road at the moment. It's great to see, and I love following your stories. So thanks very much for coming on. So that's the collect area of the mind management, step number 1. Step number 2 is to reflect. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to reflect using the how, what, when, where, why questions. So we reflect upon the information that we've just gathered. And we start to use the how, what, when, where, why sort of questions to be able to start to dig deep into it. So how did this first turn up? Where's this impacting my life? Why is this impacting my life? Why am I allowing it to impact my life? When you start to ask those questions, what's actually happening? What am I experiencing? What am I missing out on? And then we can start to work our way through it, because this is very important. Hey, Sherry Ann, thanks very much for joining me. What we can start to notice is then that we can start to get a little bit of control over it, because the more that we use the who, what, why, when, where questions, the more that we start to understand it. And just like anything in life, the more that we understand it, the more sense it makes. The more sense it makes, the more we can do something with it. So this is what we want to be doing within the reflection. We're reflecting on the information that we've collected, that initial mind dump. Then what do? We start to explore. Is this fact? Is this problem a fact, or is this problem an assumption? What's the likelihood of the worst case scenario coming out? So we can start to look into it. We can also start to do this and check for patterns of behavior, patterns of thinking, especially when you start to use mind management over and over again. What I've started to notice personally within myself is how patterns of thinking have emerged. How I've been able then to check in and to connect with my patterns and go, oh, hang on a minute. This is a similar pattern to something that I've experienced before. How have I dealt with that? So this is what we want to be doing in the reflect part. We're reflecting on the information that we've gathered. Then step number 3, brain dump. Now, what do I mean by brain dump? Now, I don't know if you've ever seen these word maps, but basically what I do is I find a word to describe the problem or the issue or the thing that I want to focus on. And then I write it down on a blank sheet of paper and I put a circle around it. And then what I do is I put words down, just short sentences, short phrases, words that connect with the problem. And that could be around my emotions. It could be around my feelings. Now, there's a very different thing between feelings and emotions. Excuse me, this frog. Should have brought a glass of water with me. So we might even want to draw pictures. If you're an artistic type of person, you might want to use different coloured pens. One of the things that I do is I write down, I just dump everything out of my brain around this problem onto a piece of paper. Now, when I do that, then what I can do is I can start to see different areas, I might be talking about emotions, I might be talking about facts, I might be talking about people, I might be talking about actions. And then what I can do is I can get my piece of paper and I get my highlighter pens, just like these ones here, and I just colour them in. Now, what that enables me to do then, again, is to be able to break it down into bite-sized chunks, into different sectors, and to be able to brain dump on those. So it's not just do it once. I then sit back and I go, okay, all right, so this is what I'm feeling. Okay, what does this feeling mean? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? So I bring loads and loads of curiosity. Now, my brain dump is something where I'm just really getting as much information out of my head and onto the paper. Because the more that we can do this, it's almost like we're taking a step back. When we take a step back from something, we can see it from a different perspective. This is what we're doing when we're putting it down on a piece of paper. So we can go deeper and deeper and deeper into the problem. Because again, what we're doing overall, we're creating more understanding. Because the more understanding we have, the more likely we are to be able to find a solution. And that's the whole purpose of this mind management. Now, I'm not saying that you sit down and do this in one go. This might take 3 or 4 sittings to be able to resolve. And for big problems, it could take even more. But most problems, about 3 or 4 sittings. So we gather this information, we gather it. And then we do the step 2, which is the reflection, which is to break it down, to understand it, to work out what our worries are. Then we move to the brain dump, where we just dump it on a piece of paper. Now, like I say, you might go back over this and you might look at it again. You might say, do you know what? I found another bit of information, or I found something else that I want to put down, or this relates to that. And what we start to do is we start to build a whole picture. Then, once we're happy with that, we move to the review. Step number 4 is review. Step number 4 is where we review steps 2 and 3. 2 and 3 is reflect and the brain dump. And what we can start to do is we visualize the worst case scenario. What if this problem was to come to fruition? What if this happened? X, Y, and Z led to, A, B, C. If we can start to conceptualize what the worst case scenario is, that's fine. That's great, but we don't want to linger on it. What we want to do now is try to think about steps that we can take to avoid that. How can we avoid the worst case scenario from happening? What can we do? What can we physically do? Because 9 times out of 10, our worries are very unfounded. Now, I did a Facebook Live some time ago about the statistics around a worry. 65%, I think, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but about 65% of our worries are totally unfounded. They've got no grounds. They're not likely to come true. They're not going to happen. And there's a whole different myriad then filtering down. And the reality is that maybe 2 to 3% of our worries actually come true. So what we've got to start to do is we've got to start to look and ask ourselves, what can we do to create possible scenarios, possible outcomes, possible ways of moving around. Hey Shannon, hey Eleanor, nice to meet you. Montana, thanks very much for jumping on. So these are the sort of things that we can start to do in our review. And again, we're still looking for those triggers. We're looking for those patterns, because if we've got triggers and patterns that we've continually used over and over again, then we can start to recognize, actually, am I the root cause of this problem? Am I the person that's starting to make this more of a mountain rather than a molehill? And that's a really good reflection to be able to have, because ultimately it's our perspective, it's our thinking that's created the problem. Now that's a very deep and meaningful way of looking at life, but it's one that is relevant. So we've got to ask ourselves, what can we do to resolve it? Then step number 5, the final one, is action and implement. What are we going to do to action and implement the scenarios, the strategies, the thoughts, the plans that we've come up with in step 4, which is the review? How are we going to implement those ideas, those concepts, the thoughts? How are we going to turn those into actions? What action do we need to take? Is there a logical sequence for those actions to be taken in? When can we start doing it? And let's not get involved in procrastination, because procrastination is not going to help the problem go away. Now, overall, this whole process, this 5-step process of mind management, to collect, reflect, brain dump, review, and then action and implementation. What we're doing is we're actually telling the brain, we're telling the mind that we've got control of this, that we're taking action, we're doing something with it, we're owning it, we're having responsibility. And that resolves a lot of the anxiety that goes along with problems. Because anxiety is the worry where we don't know what we're going to do. We're not quite sure how we're going to handle the next thing. So if we can start to recognize that we're doing something, we're actually taking action, we're doing something, we're being productive, then half of the problem is already resolved. And that means we're 50% of the way there. So I encourage you to have a go at this. Mind management. Collect, reflect, brain dump, review, implement, and act. Those are the 5 strategies. It's something that I've started doing recently, and it's becoming more of a habit now. It said that it takes 63 days to form a habit. So you're going to have to try this process for about 3 months before it becomes a habit. But if you can start to do this on a day-to-day basis, then what you start to notice is the low-level problems, they just dissolve. And then you have the confidence to be able to start to address the high-level problems, the big problems. And those too then start to dissolve. So mind management is a tool that can be used by anybody. It can be a tool that can be used in almost any situation. Because basically, it's our mind and our interpretation of the information around us that creates the problems. What we've got to work out is, how do we resolve our mind? How do we change the perspective? And by being able to collect, reflect, brain dump, review, implement, and take action, we're taking ownership of that, and we're starting to switch on and be more conscious with our choices. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. I'd love to hear what your interpretation of this is. I'd really encourage you to go away and give it a spin. You know, if you come up with a problem, try this process. Collect the information, sit down and gather it all. What's the problem? Why is it turning up? How is it turning up? How's it impacting me? What's the emotions around this? What's my feelings? Collect and gather as much of the relevant information as you can. Have you had a previous experience with this problem before? If so, how did you resolve it? What's the impact? You know, is the impact just on you, or is the impact on you and other people? Maybe it's impacting on a relationship or a friendship. Then we go to reflect. Within the reflect, we use the how, the what, the why, the where, and the when questions. We ask ourselves, is it a fact or is it an assumption? How's this impacting me? Where's it impacting? Why is it impacting? What's it impacting? That's the sort of questions we want to ask. And then we just keep going through using those how, what, why, where, and when. And we start to gather more information. Is it something you could deal with later? Maybe it's something you can park. Maybe you can't do anything straight away. But then we get to the brain dump. Now, the brain dump is the most important part. Number 3, brain dump. So if we can get to the brain dump, and this is where we get our thoughts out on a paper, and we use different key words, little short phrases, maybe even some diagrams, some colours. Like I say, if you've got different areas, you're talking about people, you're talking about finances, you're talking about actions, you're talking about tangibles, you're talking about intangibles, you can start to colour code them. And we go deeper and deeper. The deeper we go with our brain dump, the more information we can get out, the more we've got to be able to review. And review is step number 4. Steps 2 and 3, we review steps 2 and 3. We go over it. We start to think about the worst case scenario, but we don't linger on that. What we start to do is we're aware of the worst case scenario, and then we start to think about how we can process and head that off. And then ultimately, step number 5 is taking action and implementing those actions based on what we came up with in step number 4. So I encourage you, go away and give this a spin. Let me know what your thoughts are around it. If you're interested in knowing more about mind management and how we can apply this to almost any situation in our lives, especially these stubborn problems that just linger and kind of hang on, then give me a shout. I'm more than happy to run through a scenario with you one-on-one. But I wanted to share this with you because this is the way that we can start to manage our minds. And if we learn how to manage our minds, then we become unstoppable. All right, wherever you're in the world, whatever you're up to, stay safe. It's been fantastic to be able to share this with you, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. All right, until then, take care. Turu.